Hello, my friends and fellow soul defenders. My name is Christy, and this is Soul Bruises, a podcast devoted to taking a closer look at spiritual abuse. Whether you're new or a returning listener, I'm so glad you're here. This podcast exists to name, confront, and address spiritual abuse out loud. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, feel free to explore past episodes for more context. Spiritual abuse will not disappear on its own. Eradicating spiritual abuse requires many consistent voices speaking up and refusing to tolerate or accept this harmful behavior in the name of God. This podcast is my personal contribution to that effort, and I'd love for you to join me on that. Whether you're raising awareness in your church, family, friend group, or online, your voice greatly matters. Together we can create healthier, more honest communities of faith. I want to be honest and say that this podcast doesn't shy away from hard conversations. I know these topics can stir up strong emotions, painful memories, and even traumatic events. I cannot stress enough, please prioritize your mental and emotional well-being, even if that means to hit the stop button on this podcast. You are not alone, and I'm here to support you. I'm always curious to see where listeners of the Soul Bruises podcast are tuning in from. Unfortunately, spiritual abuse is a universal problem. None of us are immune. I did, however, want to take a moment to personally acknowledge those of you who are listening from Prairie Village, Kansas, Walla Walla, Washington, and the Canadian province of Alberta. I'm amazed how the internet, through emails, Zoom calls, and podcasts, has the power to connect us all, no matter where we are across the globe. It's truly fascinating. I hope that wherever you are, you feel seen, loved, and supported. In the last episode, we started talking about the 5 tactics and behaviors related to indoctrination, thought suppression, and mind control. However, as I delved deeper into researching these behaviors, I uncovered so much material that I chose to split it up into 2 episodes. In this episode, we will be concluding with the issue of mind control. But I wanted to add to that brainwashing, thought reform, and bounded choice. And if you haven't listened to the first part yet, please be sure to check out episode 13. All of these dynamics play a significant role in spiritual abuse, shaping how people are not only influenced, but controlled. The mind is a powerful thing, and while it can be used for great good, it can also be used for harm. And spiritual settings, they are no exception. So let's first talk about mind control. One of the perhaps most dangerous stages in this issue of mental manipulation is mind control. It is defined as, quote, the process of using manipulative tactics to influence, dominate, and control a person's thoughts, beliefs, and ultimately their behaviors, end quote. This is often done through propaganda and social pressures, and what's most alarming is that mind control can happen without the person's consent or even their awareness. How does this happen? First off, it can be very subtle. The goal of someone wishing to control another's mind is to gradually manipulate their thinking, their beliefs, their emotions, and finally, their behaviors over time. As a result, it can be extremely difficult for the person to even recognize they are being manipulated. It involves psychological coercion, emotional manipulation, and sometimes physical actions designed to break down a person's resistance to adopting new ways of thinking or behaving. If successful, mind control leads an individual into conformity of thought, ensuring both loyalty and compliance. Both indoctrination and mind control are harmful. One bites you, while the other infuses you with a steady stream of mind toxicity. Yet it's often a process that happens right in front of you, unless you're paying full attention and taking full control of your own decisions and thoughts. You can fall victim to it. Mind control is especially abhorrent when it's related to identity formation. Rachel Clinton Chen, trauma care practitioner, speaker, pastoral leader, and instructor at the Allender Center, explains mind control is so linked to identity formation. When we're talking about mind control, we're talking about how you're being told to make sense of yourself, how you're being told to make sense of God, how you're being told to make sense of the world. End quote. For example, when those things are being told to you by someone else, specifically someone you have given power over you, such as a cult leader, domineering spouse, or abusive spiritual leader, you have given license for someone else to speak for you, make decisions for you, tell you what to do, tell you who you are, and who you will become. That is only for you to decide. This is especially damaging to young people who are still formulating who they are and who they want to become. Authors Dr. Janja Lalich and Carla McLaren, in their book Escaping Utopia, follow individuals that were raised in cults and how these environments for them suppress their individuation, that process of becoming independent, and their personal development overall. They described cults as groups that, quote, stifle individuality and critical thinking, require intense commitment and obedience to a person or an ideology, and restrict or eliminate personal autonomy in favor of the cult's worldview and the leader's wants and needs, end quote. So as you can see, this suppression of individuality can create significant issues for those leaving these cults as they try to understand their personal identity and autonomy outside of the controlled group. Under the influence of mind control, you are treated like that 2-year-old who cannot cross the street alone, the one who must have their hand held at all times. This can be tremendously stifling for an adolescent, let alone an adult. If mind control is executed effectively, it convinces the victim that this is normal and needed. The victim of mind control may not even become aware this is happening, all the while they're being led across the street and into the arms of a highly controlled religion, group, or cult. We will discover later in this podcast, through the work of Dr. Janja Lalich, that even our choices are bound up in a well-crafted system of psychological and sociological dominance, where you think you're thinking independently, but you are actually thinking the way the high-controlled group or person wants you to think. A few historical examples of mind control include the Nazi regime, where Adolf Hitler and the Nazi government used mind control techniques to indoctrinate both children and adults into the ideology. These methods included relentless propaganda, fear-based obedience, mass rallies, ideological indoctrination in schools, and the demonization of perceived enemies. The actions of L. Ron Hubbard, who founded Scientology, used mind control tactics to manipulate and control followers. They continue to use a form of psychological counseling called auditing, where they extract personal information from people that they basically use as collateral to control the members to keep them loyal to the organization. Similarly, Warren Jeffs, former leader of a polygamous sect of the FLDS, Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, used psychological manipulation to gain absolute control over his followers. Like Scientologists' use of auditing to maintain loyalty, Jeffs used forced marriages, restricted education, and used fear tactics, imposed rigid doctrinal beliefs, and used isolation to enforce obedience within his community. Then there was the Stanford University Experiment of 1971. According to American psychologist and previous professor at Stanford University, Philip G. Zimbardo, in his November of 2002 article entitled Mind Control, Psychological Reality or Mindless Rhetoric. Mind control is, quote, the process by which individual or collective freedom of choice and action is compromised by agents or agencies that modify or distort perception, motivation, affect, cognition, or behavioral outcomes, end quote. This process, he describes, involves certain basic social, psychological principles. Those, he stated, were conformity, compliance, persuasion, dissonance, reactance, guilt and fear arousal, modeling, and identification, end quote. Zimbardo became famous, or some would say infamous, for his 1971 psychological Stanford Prison Experiment. This psychological experiment demonstrated how quickly people can adopt roles of power and submission. The scenario was as follows. A group of college students voluntarily take part in a study. They were assigned to act as the role of a prison guard or a prisoner. A simulated prison was set up in the basement of Stanford University. The students who were playing the role of guards and who were given authority over the students who were playing the role of prisoners were to treat them as actual inmates. Shockingly, in only a matter of days, the student guards became actually abusively cruel, while the student prisoners became increasingly submissive and stressed, all the while knowing that this was just an experiment. After just 6 days, the study had escalated so much that it had to be terminated because things had spiraled out of control. The psychological study revealed how easily and profoundly people can be influenced by their roles and environments, raising important questions about authority, human behavior, and the dynamics of mind control, both from the guards or persons with a perceived authority, and from the submission and compliance of the prisoner or a person submitting to that authority. Zimbardo went on to explain in his article that, quote, in some combinations, they, conformity, compliance, persuasion, dissonance, reactance, guilt and fear arousal, modeling, and identification, create a powerful crucible of extreme mental and behavioral manipulation when synthesized with several other real-world factors, such as a charismatic authoritarian leader, dominant ideologies, social isolation, physical debilitation, induced phobias, and extreme threats, or promised rewards that are typically deceptively orchestrated over an extended time period in settings where they are applied intensively. A body of social science evidence shows that when systematically practiced by state-sanctioned police, military, or destructive cults, mind control can induce false confessions, create converts who willingly torture or kill invented enemies, and engage indoctrinated members to work tirelessly, giving up their money and even their lives for the cause." End quote. When these characteristics are mixed with a charismatic or an authoritarian leader who enforces their dominant ideologies and uses threats to create a dangerous recipe for disaster not only in the secular contexts, such as the Stanford Prison Experiment, but also in religious settings. Erich Fromm, German social psychologist and psychoanalyst, wrote that, quote, "The capacity to doubt, to criticize, and to disobey may well be all that stands between a human being and a life of slavery." End quote. When we give up our mind, we have entered a life of slavery that often we don't see until the jail doors are closed right in front of us and the key is hidden from our sight. Slavery is about the absence of our autonomy, being controlled and oppressed, and being stripped of our rights and free will. Slavery subjugates us to the will of someone else, while freedom preserves that autonomy to make our own choices without being coerced or controlled. Freedom liberates us to live our own values. Public intellectual Noam Chomsky wrote, quote, "The smart way to keep people passive and obedient is to strictly limit the spectrum of acceptable opinion, but allow very lively debate within that spectrum. This highlights how critical debate is confined to only certain questions and discussions while maintaining the illusion of freedom." End quote. This can happen more easily within a controlling church environment. Members learn which topics are acceptable to speak freely about, or discuss openly, or which ones are best to be kept silent. They learn which comments they will be judged on and come to know how they will be viewed, if they are transparent about their independent thoughts. Surely there could be a place in a religious setting for an open expression of non-conforming or divergent thoughts and ideas. If not, we must ask ourselves, are we creating spaces that are truly free? Mind control is subtle and insidious. American medical health professional and author Stephen Hassan wrote, quote, "It works by exploiting normal human weakness, our desire to belong, to feel special, be a part of a group, and to be a follower of someone who knows more than we do." End quote. According to self-determination theory, developed originally by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, people have 3 intrinsic psychological needs, which are these, quote, "a sense of autonomy, a sense of competence, and a feeling of relatedness, sometimes described as belonging," end quote. Have a sense of autonomy where you feel you have control of your own life and decisions instead of being forced. Feeling like you're competent, that you're capable and good at something. And relatedness, where you feel connected to others and feel supported. Unfortunately, through the actions of both mind control and brainwashing, these psychological needs are in great jeopardy. Author Stephen Hassan has devoted his career to understanding the tactics of cults and other high-controlled religions or groups. He has extensively focused his work to examine how persons or organizations seek to control others' minds, particularly through undue influence. This form of influence involves using excessive persuasion, manipulation, or coercion to dominate someone's independent thinking and decision-making. Hassan suggests that undue influence works by manipulating individuals into surrendering their autonomy. Remember one of those intrinsic or natural psychological needs? This psychological manipulation exploits power imbalances to gain control using profound emotional harm. This action of undue influence serves to benefit the exploiter over the victim's well-being and freedom. In the 1970s, Hassan, who was only 19 at the time, became a member of the Unification Church. Outsiders nicknamed the group the Moonies because their leader was Reverend Sun Myung Moon. After belonging to the group for 2 years, Stephen Hassan left in a most unusual way. He got into a serious car accident that required medical care. This led to his parents intervening and seeking out ways to help to deprogram him from what he had been taught. Following this experience, Hassan has made it his life's work to understand cults and the extensive mind control they implement. Drawing on his personal experience and professional study of cults and high-control groups, Hassan created the BITE model, B-I-T-E, an acronym for behavior, information, thought, and emotional control. Hassan's tool helped to identify the psychological systems behind these high-controlled groups. This model has been applied to understand abusive relationships, extremist groups, and other authoritarian systems. His work enables us to recognize these mechanisms before they affect us personally, or to help someone we love break free from a high-controlling group, just as Hassan's parents helped him escape. Hassan witnessed firsthand how high-control groups use psychological techniques to recruit and retain followers, techniques that undermine basic human rights and threaten the foundation of a free society. Leaders of such groups or cults often exert undue influence, with the ultimate goal of dismantling an individual's authentic identity and replacing it into the image of, you guessed it, the cult leader themselves. The BITE model offers a clear and relatable explanation how behavior, information, thought, and emotional control can be weaponized to erode personal autonomy. These methods foster a dependence on the group or leader, making it extremely difficult for individuals to leave or question the control and authority of that leader. The first aspect of the BITE model is behavioral control. It is the B in BITE. The definition of behavioral control, according to Stephen Hassan, is, quote, the manipulation of an individual's actions and environment to restrict autonomy, end quote. There is often a regulation of personal schedules for sleep, diet, or work, what you wear, how you speak. Behaviors are monitored and micromanaged to ensure conformity and dependence on the group for basic needs is encouraged. There is a limit placed on personal freedom that fosters obedience through a controlled environment. Personal freedoms are restricted as individuals may be required by the leaders to get permission before making any significant decisions. In extreme cases, some groups have gone to the extent of physically imprisoning their members, others imprisoning them psychologically. A huge attempt is made to regulate the individual's physical reality with the understanding that controlling behavior is the key to controlling the person. In August of 1973, a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden, led to 4 employees being taken hostage and held captive in the bank's vault for 6 days. Despite the captor threatening them with a weapon, even placing nooses around their neck, he did not physically harm any of them. During the standoff, a paradoxical bond developed between the hostages and the captor. When he finally surrendered, something very unusual happened. Those captured were not angry with the hostage taker. In fact, during a phone call with the Swedish Prime Minister, one hostage expressed complete trust in her captor, but stated that she feared more that she would die by the police assault on the building. All the hostages refused to testify against him, and one even became engaged to him. The term Stockholm Syndrome, that describes a hostage developing an emotional attachment to their captor, derived from this incident. What would cause this syndrome to take place? How could this even happen? The Britannica website offers a psychologist's response to this phenomenon. They stated that, quote, the bond is initially created when a captor threatens a captive's life, deliberates, and then chooses not to kill the captive. The captive's relief at the removal of the death threat is transposed into feelings of gratitude toward the captor for giving him or her life, end quote. They described how it takes only a few days to create this bond because the desire of the victim to survive outweighs the urge for someone to hate the person that created the adverse situation in the first place. Psychologists added that, quote, survival instinct is at the heart of Stockholm Syndrome. Victims live in enforced dependence and interpret rare or small acts of kindness in the midst of horrible conditions as good treatment. They often become hypervigilant to the needs and demands of their captors, making psychological links between the captor's happiness and their own, end quote. Something similar can happen in a highly controlled religious setting. One might refer to it as spiritual Stockholm Syndrome. The abuser wants to take control of the autonomy of their members or exert their dominance of thought over their followers. They have their own best interest in mind. A skilled spiritual abuser will have mastered the deceptive tactics that lure the recipients of their abuse into a state of cognitive dissonance or downright compliance. How else can one explain the standing ovations for spiritual leaders who have committed an act of abuse but have convinced their followers, either through a false narrative of their abusive acts or a public apology only meant to garner sympathy and support? Unlike a bank robbery where the perpetrators will likely come in brandishing weapons, the weapons of a spiritual abuser will often be their words. Those captured by the deceptive acts of a spiritual abuser will fall prey to the abuse that sometimes they can't even see yet. It isn't until they become aware through education, are able to step back or remove themselves from such a person. When someone wants their autonomy and they will manipulate an individual's actions and environment to do so, they have started to implement the first model of behavioral control. Hassan's second bite model is information control. It is the I in bite. In high control groups and cults, there is a concerted effort to capitalize on the control of information. Through deception, the group deliberately distorts and withholds information to make it more acceptable. They do this by systematically lying to their members. There is a restriction of outside sources of information, such as the internet, books, news, sometimes families outside of the group, and former members. This involves the restricting of access to information to the members of the group by the censoring of outside media and literature, or the propagating of propaganda of the organizational's beliefs. Modern technology like texting, calls, video chats, and social media is monitored. There is a concerted effort to keep the members so busy that they don't have time to reflect or investigate anything. There is an effort to compartmentalize the information. Leaders hold a tight control on the information, and they decide who has access to specific knowledge and when. This structure of hierarchy keeps most of the group in the dark on the group's true intentions of practices, while the leadership is fully aware. This system sets up and reinforces a dependency on the leader. It also prevents the critical examination of the ideology of the group. High control groups will often encourage spying or reporting on other members. Those monitoring them will report back to the leadership the deviant thoughts and behaviors. This creates an environment of fear. Propaganda is created by the group, such as a newsletter, videos, and manipulated quotes that are used to reinforce the group's worldviews, all the while discrediting the outside world perspectives. This creates an isolation of the members from the others, which in turn creates an echo chamber or siloed thinking, and isolating members from external sources of knowledge. This type of environment creates that echo chamber that reinforces groups' ideology and prevents critical thinking. High-controlled groups exploit unethical practices of confession to further manipulate their members. Personal information that is shared in confidential settings or in a prayer group, which as we often know is a potential hotbed of gossip, can be weaponized. Such breaches of trust erode boundaries and instill deep feelings of guilt and shame. One of the more egregious acts is the withholding of forgiveness, leaving that member trapped in a perpetual state of emotional vulnerability. These manipulative strategies work together to create a closed system that isolates individuals and enforces unwavering loyalty to the group. The third model is the thought control. It is the T in bite. High control groups use thought control to manipulate members' identities and beliefs, with the requirements to adopt the group's dogma as absolute truth. Members are encouraged to see the world in black and white terms, good versus evil, even us versus them. By doing this, a division is created between you, the insider, and them, the outsider. This fosters loyalty to the group, but also demonizes those we might disagree with on the outside. Some groups actually go as far as to change names and identities in the attempt to detach members from their previous selves. Often the use of loaded language, which is using words that have strong emotional connotations to sway an audience both toward a positive or negative reaction. This loaded language is used as a persuasive tool to exploit stereotypes or elicit an emotional response. In short, it's a form of rhetoric designed to influence opinion through their choice of vocabulary. Also, the tactic of repetitive cliches that are used to oversimplify very complex ideas and sift them down into meaningless buzzwords. The tactics of loaded language and repetitive cliches serve to constrict knowledge and discourage critical thinking, and in turn ensure a member's reliance on the group's ideology. There is a condition of suppression of negative thoughts, or even questioning thoughts, narrowing them down into strictly good and proper ones. Literature is provided by the group that leads readers to the quote-unquote right conclusions. Any rational analysis or criticism is outright rejected, especially if that questioning involves the leader. Being inquisitive about doctrine or policies is perceived as threatening and is strictly forbidden. Others' belief systems are seen as illegitimate, even evil. Your only option as a member is to accept the group's worldview, leading them to conform to the group's ideology, while isolating them from outside perspectives or their own independent thoughts. Lastly, the fourth bite control model is emotional control. It is the E in bite. Emotional control is used by high control groups to manipulate their members. During this time, the number of acceptable emotions dwindles and feelings get suppressed in favor of not causing any resistance. Members are often taught that emotions such as anger, homesickness, or doubt are selfish evil, or wrong. Some of these uncomfortable emotions are exploited to instill fear, guilt, or loyalty. This is done through inducing feelings of shame or guilt for nonconformity. Emotional numbing and emotion-stopping techniques like spiritual bypassing or spiritual rationalization are used to block uncomfortable feelings like anger or doubt, imposing a phobia of being too frightened of ever leaving the group or questioning the authority of the group's leader. There is this intense effort to convince followers that they will only be happy within the group and not outside the group. A fear of punishment is instilled to create a sense of forced loyalty. Love bombing is done through excessive praise, admiration, and affection, regardless whether it's a healthy attachment or not. Group rituals are often held to create emotional highs. Sometimes the love bombing is used to leverage the loyalty of the member, and guilt feelings are implemented through statements such as, "You don't love God if you can't believe all of the group's religious dogma." This manipulation of emotions creates compliance and emotional dependence on the group and the leader. These tactics create emotional dependence on the group or leader. Members are made to feel unworthy, as if they are failing their families or faith, and this guilt is weaponized to keep them compliant and indebted to the group. Keeping the emotional feelings of members in check, they have to endure many emotional highs and lows. Those high points mean enduring love bombing and being praised one minute only to be shamed and criticized the next. Again, riding these waves of erratic emotions increases the stress for the member and also increases the probability that they will remain compliant to keep the peace. Many of these high control groups rely on phobia indoctrination, which is, quote, the deliberate process of instilling intense, irrational fears used to control behaviors, end quote. By instilling fears about leaving the group or questioning the authority of it, members are frequently told happiness and fulfillment will be impossible outside of the group, and leaving will result in everything from hell, insanity, harm to yourself or to your families. Those that leave are shunned or labeled as worldly, weak, or brainwashed by outsiders. These fear-based tactics lead to an environment of dependency, fear, guilt, and keeping their members emotionally controlled. The mind is a powerful thing that is mostly directed by rational thought and emotions. This bite model plays out the part of rational thought through the behavior, information, and thought, while the feeling part of the brain is spoken about in the bite model's presentation on emotional control. This model was created to evaluate the individual, the leaders, and the organizations as to where they stood on the influence continuum. Steve Hassan's spectrum shows a constructive and healthy place on one side and a destructive and unhealthy pattern on the other. You can find Steve Hassan's influence continuum scale from his 2018 book, Combating Cult Mind Control, on his website, freedomofmind.com. It's extremely helpful in finding where you land as an individual and as a leader or as an organization. You may or may not have heard of the term brainwashing. While it is similar to mind control, it is slightly different. Mind control is a broader term, while brainwashing is more specific. Mind control tends to be more subtle and coercive, while brainwashing is more extreme and forceful in its attempts to reprogram the mind of another by initiating actions of isolation, deprivation, and psychological abuse. Both methods are harmful and manipulative, but mind control is more insidious and long-term, whereas brainwashing is more intense, immediate, and traumatic. Merriam-Webster defines brainwashing as, quote, a forcible indoctrination to induce someone to give up basic political, social, or religious beliefs and attitudes to accept contrasting, regimented ideas. This is done by persuasion of propaganda or salesmanship." End quote. The term brainwashing was first introduced in 1950 by an English gentleman named Edward Hunter. He was describing how the Chinese government seemed to secure the cooperation of its citizens during the Korean War. They developed a word for brainwashing, "shi nao," which literally translates to wash brain. Britannica defined brainwashing as, quote, "a controversial theory that purports that the human mind can be altered or controlled against a person's will by manipulative psychological techniques." End quote. It is more direct and aggressive. You see this with prisoner of war and hostage situations. There is a concerted and intense effort to break down the individual through psychological abuse in the form of threats, repetitive indoctrination, physical abuse, and sometimes through sleep deprivation. The primary goal is to wipe away the existing beliefs completely and instill new ones. An example of this is a prisoner of war situation where someone is being forced to reject their previous loyalties and adopt their new ideology. Another term that is used interchangeably with brainwashing is coercive persuasion. In the article by a distinguished professor, emeritus of psychiatry at University of California, Joel E. Dimsdale, entitled "Brainwashing Has a Grim History That We Shouldn't Dismiss," he talks about how the scientific research and the historical accounts are helpful in helping us understand coercive persuasion and brainwashing. There is definitely a method to the brainwasher's madness and a way to measure it. Quote, "So what are its defining and measurable properties?" First, coercive persuasion typically involves surreptitious manipulation. Individuals might not even know they are being targeted. Further actions are taken at the expense of the targeted individuals. Someone else benefits from the manipulation. Some degree of sleep deprivation is often part of the regimen, leaving the victim fatigued, confused, and suggestible. And coercive persuasion seems to be more effective when the victim is isolated from others' views and beliefs. End quote. Certainly those characteristics could be referring to prisoners of war, members of Jonestown, or the followers of David Koresh. They could be citizens of North Korea or even a modern-day cult or cult leader. These are signs to be cognizant of and things to be aware of. Robert J. Lifton is an author and well-known psychiatrist, most known for his work on thought reform. Though this term is closely related to brainwashing, it is considered a more academic term. Thought reform is defined as, quote, "a structured, systematic process of shaping a person's thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors through social, psychological, and ideological pressure," end quote. The way it is different from brainwashing is that it does not require physical coercion, instead working through the incredibly influential vices of guilt and peer pressure. Where brainwashing is more of a reprogramming process, thought reform is more methodical and a gradual process of adopting new beliefs. An example of this is a cult using group confession, public shaming, and isolation to gradually shift members' belief systems. Lifton details his model of thought reform in his influential book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism, where he lays out the 8 key characteristics of thought environments. I will lay those out here, but I would encourage you to seek out a psychologist, psychiatrist, sociologist, or mental health professional to explain them in further detail, as I am not a medical health professional or expert. Lifton states the 8 criteria of thought reform are: number 1, milieu control. Imagine if someone told you who you could talk to, what you could watch, even what you could read. They try to make you only hear things that support their way of thinking and block out anything else. This is what milieu control means. It's about controlling your environment and the information you get. Number 2, mystical manipulation. This is when someone makes you feel like you're part of something super important and bigger than yourself. They tell you that everything you do is part of some grand plan. It's like creating that feeling that you're the hero in the movie, but the movie is really about their goals. Number 3, demand for purity. This means seeing everything as either totally good or totally bad, with no middle ground. You're told that you need to be perfect, and if you make one mistake or question anything, you're suddenly bad or wrong. It's like having a test where there's only 2 possible grades, A+ or F, and no in between. Number 4, cult of confession. In this situation, you're asked to tell everyone about your mistakes and flaws, and sometimes even do it publicly. It's like having to apologize for everything you've done wrong all the time, which makes you feel guilty and like you're not good enough. It's used to control your behavior and makes you feel constantly bad about yourself. Number 5, sacred science. Here, the group or leader tells you that their beliefs are the only truth and that nothing else is valid. They might say things like, "This is the only way to understand the world, and anyone who disagrees is wrong or even evil." It's like someone saying their opinion is the only truth and everyone else's is nonsense. Number 6, loading the language. This is where a group uses special words or phrases that only make sense to people inside the group. They might create a whole new language that you have to learn to fit in. It's like a secret code that keeps outsiders from understanding or questioning what the group is doing. It also helps the group members think in a specific way. Number 7, doctrine over person. The group tells a person, let's call him Oliver, that what he wants for himself doesn't matter, only what is best for the group. The group makes it seem like having personal goals or dreams are selfish, and the only thing that matters is helping the group succeed. Over time, Oliver stops thinking about what he wants and starts believing that his whole purpose is to serve the group. If the group ever wanted something different, they would make Oliver feel guilty, like he was being selfish or betraying the group. Number 8, dispensing of existence. The group tells Oliver that anyone who isn't part of the group is either clueless or purposely trying to lead people in the wrong direction. They make it seem like outsiders aren't as smart, strong, or enlightened as the group members. Over time, Oliver starts believing that life outside the group isn't worth anything, and that leaving would mean losing his purpose. He is convinced that the group is the only place where he can be safe, successful, and right. Lifton's model created these 8 criteria framework to understand how totalitarian groups methodically exert significant influence over individuals' thoughts and behaviors. Lastly, there is the bounded choice theory that is so eloquently laid out by the brilliant sociologist, cult expert, and author Dr. Janja Lalich. I won't go into great detail because I had the distinct honor and opportunity of a lifetime to interview her recently for my podcast. You can check that out. It's Soul Bruises episode 14. There she shares about her bounded choice theory. She also authored a book entitled Bounded Choice. Briefly, however, her theory has 4 systems. These systems combine to create a self-sealing system where members can internalize the ideology of the group, and all of their choices lead back to the group. These systems combine to create a self-sealing system where members will internalize the ideology of the group and all their choices lead back to the group, making it seem like the only logical path and their only choice is what the group wants. Essentially, they feel trapped. It's like being in a maze where every path leads back to the same place. Because of this, leaving the group seems nearly impossible, because their world is shaped so completely for them. Her bounded choice theory is widely accepted because it explains the long-term loyalty of people to highly controlled groups or cults without assuming they are brainwashed or stripped of their free will. Put in simpler terms, let's say you join an exclusive club. At first it seems amazing. Everyone is super nice and they tell you you're special. Yet over time, things start to change. The rules get stricter. You're expected to spend all your free time with the club. If you skip a meeting, you're made to feel guilty. And if you question the rules, you're treated differently. The club often convinces you that your friend or family members just don't understand and are a bad influence on you. So you start cutting people off that care about you because you believe the club is the only place you truly belong. This is where the bounded choice theory is unique. Even when the club is controlling your life, you don't even realize that every decision you make seems to be your choice. But in reality, you are only being given choices that keep you loyal. Much like picking between two pre-approved choices instead of choosing what you actually want to do. Because of this, leaving seems nearly impossible. Your whole identity is wrapped up in that club. Leaving would mean losing friends, your purpose, and maybe being labeled as a failure, traitor, or dissenter. So you stay, even though deep down, something just doesn't feel right. Dr. Lalich breaks up her theory into 4 systems. They are, number 1, charismatic authority. This is when a leader has such a strong personality that people admire and follow them no matter what. Imagine someone who seems incredibly confident, gives inspiring speeches, and convinces people that they have all the answers. Their followers believe they're special and might even defend them, even when they do things that don't make sense or seem unfair. Number 2, transcendent belief system. This is when a group believes they have the ultimate truth about life and that everyone else is wrong or lost, saying things like we're the only ones who truly understand. Strict beliefs are held about what's right and wrong. There's an effort to make members feel special for being part of this enlightened group. Anyone who questions it is seen as ignorant or even dangerous. Number 3, systems of control. These are the rules and restrictions that keep people from thinking for themselves. Let's say the club has rules about what you could wear, who you could talk to, or even what you could read. They might watch you closely to make sure you're following the rules and punish you if you step out of line. Over time, you start policing yourself because you don't want to get in trouble or be excluded. Number 4, systems of influence. This one might be the most profound because this is how the group changes the way you think. To do this, they might constantly repeat certain phrases or ideas until you believe them. They reward members who follow the rules by giving them praise, status, or privileges, and criticize, guilt, or shame those who don't. They might also tell you that outsiders just don't understand the truth, making you less likely to trust outside opinions. Simply put, a charismatic leader gains a devoted following. The group teaches that they have the one true belief system. They incorporate strict rules to control behavior and psychological tricks are implemented to keep members loyal. Mind control, brainwashing, thought reform, or bounded choice theory. Which term is best? Each depends on what you're describing. First, mind control is used to discuss a total external control over a person's thoughts and actions. While the term has some scholarly acceptance, it's often overused. Secondly, brainwashing refers to a forced ideological conversion. This term can be controversial. Some would say it's a myth. There are others that suggest renaming it coercive persuasion. Thirdly, thought reform describes the gradual reshaping of beliefs. This term is academically solid and was developed by the psychiatrist Robert J. Lifton. He created a deeper framework for understanding how people's minds are influenced over time. And lastly, bounded choice, which is a term best used when explaining why people stay in high-controlled groups long term. It was developed by Dr. Janja Lalich and is the most modern and comprehensive explanation. Each concept offers a different perspective, so choosing the right term depends on the context of the discussion. So you're part of a church organization. You attend regularly. You've been going there since you were born. You don't want to be indoctrinated or controlled. You don't want to belong to a church that is highly controlling or in the category of being a cult. What are some signs you can look for that may indicate you are in a high control group or, God forbid, a cult? Do any of them exhibit patterns of mind control, thought reform, brainwashing, or bounded choice? Do you recognize any red flags? Humanist chaplain Anastasia Somerville Wong wrote an article entitled 25 Signs You're in a Highly Controlled Group or Cult. She stated that, quote, by the time serious problems become apparent to wider society, it is often too late to prevent serious harm to the people involved and affected by them, end quote. This is the reason and urgency why podcasts, articles, documentaries, and books are being written, recorded, and filmed, raising awareness and encouraging early recognition. Those in this advocacy group want to prevent this serious problem from continuing to harm individuals, churches, and organizations. Recognizing the signs of coercion and control often begins when individuals experience and witness this troubling behavior. Acknowledgement and awareness of these symptoms are essential steps in preventing further harm to individuals, churches, and organizations. And mind control, indoctrination, thought reform, and all that has been discussed in this episode and in episode 13 are helpful in regards to that prevention. While no place is perfect, we can always create safer and healthier spaces of worship and community. In a future podcast, we will delve into those 25 signs, unpacking them to uncover the trappings that keep us held down. So stay tuned. So to recap, the first topic discussed in this 5th Tactics and Behavior of Spiritual Abuse was that of indoctrination, which involves teaching someone to accept a specific set of beliefs without encouraging critical thinking or questioning. For example, teaching a child a rigid religious ideology without exposing them to alternative perspectives, taking the mindset that we have the absolute truth and this is what it is and you will believe it because I will coerce you into believing it. Secondly, the concept of thought suppression was introduced and defined as the deliberate or enforced blocking of specific thoughts, feelings, or doubts, often imposed by oneself or a controlling entity. An example would be someone expressing a doubt or an uncomfortable feeling or asking a challenging question in a highly controlled environment. Those are not only discouraged but often minimized. while still outside thoughts are rationalized away with spiritual jargon. And lastly, the most extreme forms of controlling the mind were discussed in this episode: mind control, brainwashing, thought reform, and bounded choice. All use systematic methods to take away a person's ability to think and choose freely. These tactics shape a person's thoughts, emotions, and actions in so many powerful ways. Groups that use these tactics rely on emotional manipulation and fear to keep members loyal, and over time, members find themselves giving up their independence, their ability to think critically, and even their personal identity, all for the sake of pleasing a leader or group that values your obedience over your freedom. Think of it like a garden. Indoctrination plants the seed of belief, thought suppression trims away doubts and questions, and full-scale aspects of mind control eventually take over the entire garden, leaving no room for independent growth. In an article entitled Mind Control and Dogmaticism in Spiritual Abuse, which was put out by the Allender Center, of which I will speak more about in a moment, it stated this, quote, "These systems, no matter how blatant or subtle, are ultimately about control, structuring, power, and authority in such a way that spiritually abusive leaders have total control over the minds and bodies of those in their communities." End quote. Rachel Clinton, one of the article's contributors, added that, quote, "There is a leadership or authority in place that get to dictate what the truth is, how to interpret scripture, how you should be living, who you are, and there's very little room for deviating from that." End quote. Mind control is very much a part of spiritual abuse. It isolates and instills a mistrust of the world around you. Rachel went on to say that, quote, "The message is clear. The world is dangerous. You can't talk to those people. We're the only ones who really know God, the only ones you can trust if you want to be safe and happy. What makes these messages so devastating is that they also seek to distort, undermine, create doubt in your own ability to interact with the world or read scripture, to the point that you are dependent upon the leader to make decisions and clarify what you believe." End quote. Though the Bible doesn't use the term indoctrination or mind control, it warns about false teachings, the importance of truth, and encourages believers to engage in discernment and critical thinking. Its broad message promotes spiritual freedom, not spiritual slavery. It promotes a relationship with God based on truth, not manipulation or coercion. These are important distinctions, especially in a religious context where spiritual terms get used as weapons rather than keys to freedom in Christ. I mentioned the Allender Center a few minutes ago. It's an organization based in Seattle, Washington, dedicated to addressing trauma and fostering healing through counseling, education, and training. The center was founded by Dan Allender, a psychologist, author, and speaker known for his work in trauma, abuse recovery, and spiritual growth. I'll include the links to the Allender Center in the show notes. The center operates under the umbrella of the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, combining psychology, theology, and the arts to provide resources and care for individuals and communities affected by trauma. While their primary focus is on trauma healing, they place a strong emphasis on education and training. Their approach is holistic, integrating psychology, theology, and spirituality, particularly in addressing spiritual trauma. They've produced several books, offer a podcast, which I'll link in the show notes, and provide various online resources. The center is well respected for its compassionate, faith-integrated approach to trauma care, helping people move forward toward restoration and resilience. They are definitely worth checking out. Before I go, I also wanted to take the opportunity to advertise an important conference. I've mentioned it in previous episodes. It's called the Restore Conference. I went a couple years ago when it was in Chicago, and this year's conference was in Phoenix, Arizona. It's put on by the investigative journalist and host of the podcast, The Roys Report, Julie Roys. I will add a link to the conference in her podcast as well. The Restore Conference addresses abuse, corruption, and toxic leadership within the church. Its mission is dedicated to restoring faith in God and the church by fostering healing, accountability, and reform within Christian communities. The conference is an extension of Julie Roy's courageous advocacy work. As an independent journalist and podcaster, she has taken bold steps to expose abuse and misconduct in faith-based institutions, fighting for transparency, justice, and system change. As you can imagine, her work garners its share of criticism and harassment, but her determination is unwavering and inspiring. If you're interested in topics like these and want to be a part of this community of soul defenders, I would highly encourage you to check it out. It's a tremendous opportunity to connect and learn and feel like you're part of something bigger. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast episode. Soul Bruise's whole purpose is to educate and expose, to eradicate and erase spiritual abuse in any form it takes, especially in the grab for our minds and autonomy. This form of thievery cannot be overlooked and needs to be exposed. Spiritual and psychological abuse is still very common today. If you have the freedom to think critically and question what you've been taught, use it. And if you feel trapped, remember your mind is your own. We don't always have control over being indoctrinated as a child, but as we grow and reach an age where we can think for ourselves, we have the ability to question, explore, and approach things differently. Faith should not be about living in fear or control. Christ offers freedom, not bondage. Your spiritual journey belongs to you, and you have the right to seek truth for yourself. If that freedom is ever threatened, be aware. Psychological manipulation may already be at work. Psychological abuse in the spiritual context can be tricky, but I hope something today encourages you to seek out more information about this topic. Pass the podcast link on to friends if you think it would be helpful. You can find other episodes of the podcast at soulbruises.com. The days of staying silent about spiritual abuse are over for me. I hope they are for you also. This is Christy Hodson, and you've been listening to the Soul Bruises podcast. Until we connect again, be human, be kind, be both.